Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. In the middle of February, something called the Syrian Electronic Army, hackers in Syria that support the government, hacked into Al Jazeera's servers and found some emails. Some of them were written by Hashem, who was a Middle East correspondent for the Arab Al Jazeera channel. In those emails, he expressed his concern about the way Al Jazeera was covering the conflict in Syria. It later led to his resignation. Now joining us to talk about these events, his resignation, and the situation in the Middle East and media is Hashem. Ali joins us from Beirut, where he's a television journalist. As I said, he worked for Al Jazeera Arabic. He's covered the conflict in Libya, Lebanese politics. He covered stories on the Syrian-Lebanese border recently. He previously worked for BBC, and before that at Manhar TV in Lebanon. And as I said, he joins us from Beirut. Thanks very much, Ali.
You're welcome.
So start with what happened in February. What were these hackers, and then what happened?
Actually, in February, it seems that some hackers, the pro-regime hackers, were able to get, into the servers of Al Jazeera network, and they were able to, go into several, or let's say hundreds of email accounts of journalists and executives and whatever. So those people were able to go into our emails and see the conversations that were going through inside the channel. One of those conversations was between me and one of the Arabic channel's presenters, and then we were just talking about the coverage and points regarding this coverage. We had some problems, as for me, late in before in May, I had a problem with the channel when we were on the borders with Syria, and there were a lot of armed men, militants, tens of them, and they were with weapons and just moving along the borders from Lebanon to Syria. At that time, everyone was talking about the revolution in Syria, that it's peaceful revolution, it's not using arms, but what we saw, it was really interesting, and kind of, if it was any other channel, this should be a breaking news, it should be a big story. But actually, Al Jazeera, let me say, the policy and the channel, it's not maybe the journalists inside. They went back to the owners, and then it was kind of, it's not allowed, and I was asked to go back to Beirut, and those footage weren't ever aired on Al Jazeera. And this problem, made a kind of credibility problem between me and the channel. And I tried my best to solve this issue. I tried my best to tell the my seniors, my bosses, all of them, that there is a problem and we should solve such a problem. Actually, when this happened, and I was talking about this issue with my colleague in Doha, she's a well-known presenter over there. Actually, also she told me a lot about what she's passing by and what she's going through, and how she was, on air, and then she was asked to leave there because she asked kind of hard questions or harsh questions to the opposition members who are kind of supported by Qatar. So we were talking these issues, and then someone just popped in and took our privacy off, and just took everything and published them on air. Some were kind of on the Syrian television, some were on newspapers in Beirut and in many other Arab capitals. So this was the story at that time.
So let's, before we go further into your own story, let's back up one step. What exactly did you see in terms of arms going into Syria? Who do you think, or were you able to tell was supplying the arms?
Actually, I can't identify who's really supplying the arms, but actually we saw armed men just crossing the river, the Great Northern River, which is the only a natural barrier between Lebanon and Syria. They were just crossing that barrier and going into Syria, and then clashing with the Syrian army. That was in May, and even something similar happened in April, but it wasn't on camera. But in May it was on camera, and we had the footage, and no one wanted to have them on air. At that time, everybody was watching. We were as journalists, myself were the only Arab news channel on the borders, and we were trying to see what's going on over there.
So you're talking almost a year ago now, then.
Yeah, that was in May. May 2011.
And I mean, I was planning actually to get into this subject a little further on, but we're here, so let's talk about it. Is it your sense that what happened in Syria that was in fact, I mean, this is what I'm getting from the people I'm talking to, that there was a real peaceful protest developing across the country. That protest was repressed by the government forcefully, but then it gets militarized, and to a large extent by forces outside Syria. The protest gets militarized. Is that scenario what seems to you to be correct?
Actually, it was clear. The protest started peacefully, but it seems that quickly it went into militarizing. Some external factors or factions, sorry, wanted the revolution to be militarized, and they wanted to face al-Assad's crackdown with weapons. And maybe this was bad for the revolution. Maybe if the revolution stayed peaceful, it might have achieved a lot. But what happened is that I'm not sourcing or quoting. I just saw with my eyes, and it was in the beginning of the revolution. It was just like 1 month and a half from the revolution, and things were, I was seeing a lot of weapons, people with RPGs, people with Kalashnikovs, just crossing from the borders, and they were not one or two, they were, big number. They were just dominating the whole village that we were on the borders with. So, the militarization of the revolution started early, and maybe those who were trying maybe to push into they want al-Assad to fall as soon as possible. Those wanted to say that al-Assad is facing the peaceful crackdown with weapons, while the others on the revolution side are kind of peaceful people, are not holding weapons.
And you weren't able to ascertain who those people were crossing the river, those fighters?
No, actually that was impossible. You can't ask, who are those people, because, you are just seeing armed men, and, we were just beside them. So it was clear that those people are fighting for the Syrian revolution. But who are they? Some of them were Lebanese, some of them were Syrians. But, you can't, at that time it wasn't clear. There were no umbrella they were fighting under, After like 6 or 7 months, we started hearing about the Free Syrian Army. But at that time, we didn't hear about anyone. It was just like, those are armed men just crossing the borders and fighting against al-Assad's army. But it wasn't clear who are they and who are they backed by, who is giving them the weapons, who is really pushing them to do this and that.
Now, so in terms of your email correspondence and your concerns, what was it about the coverage that you didn't find legitimate? Or, I mean, you'd say this story wasn't covered, the crossing of the river by these fighters, but what about the rest of the coverage of Syria?
No, actually, this was the main issue that I had, a problem with, because it's really a problem of credibility. Whenever you have your own footage and you are your channel's eyes in that area, and the channel is refusing to air such pictures, then you should have some question marks. You should raise some question marks. I'm not coming to. I didn't come to Al Jazeera, as an amateur. I'm a professional. I used to work for the BBC before for 4 or 5 years with the BBC, and then there is a kind of things we learn over there about the credibility, about objectivity, being unbiased. I might not be supportive of the British government's doctrines or policies in the Middle East, but I respect working at that time for the BBC, because they used to respect us as journalists. So the problem is when you are a journalist and you're not being respected as a journalist, and then you're asked to do something, in parallel with the agenda of the channel's owners, and this is the problem. This is the big problem that any journalist might find.
Right. Now, in one of the emails, in one of the reports I read about the emails, one of the emails says that there's this conflict for journalists between the Qatari agenda, it was described, and reporting. I mean, what is the Qatari agenda in terms of Syria?
No, actually, we didn't talk in this issue.
I'm not sure it was your email, actually. I think it might even have been referenced to someone else's.
In general, I can tell you one thing. You know, there is no government. There is no governments are not charities. You know, so whenever a government is paying for a channel, then I respect all my colleagues at Al Jazeera. They're all good journalists, professionals, and I really I'm proud to work with them. But the problem, it's not in the journalists, it's not in even the executives in the Al Jazeera. It's not a problem with Al Jazeera. It's the problem with those who are really financing Al Jazeera, which are the Qataris. You know, today the Qataris are a kind of committing. You know, they are taking Al Jazeera to commit suicide. They're forcing Al Jazeera to commit suicide. Al Jazeera was kind of respected by everyone. Even Al Jazeera went with 2 or 3 languages, and everyone was watching Al Jazeera because they really believed that Al Jazeera is doing good journalism. Today, it's a big problem right now. Wherever you go around the Arab world, everyone is questioning the credibility of Al Jazeera. They're questioning the agenda Al Jazeera is working with or it's working for. Today, it's not anymore that Al Jazeera is doing journalism for journalism. Today, journalism is being used for politics.
And what is that politics? What does Qatar want in Syria?
Actually, it's really strange. You know that, or everyone knows also that the Qatari regime used to be one of the strongest and the closest allies of the Syrian regime. And that wasn't for 1 year or 2 years. That was for the last at least 6 years. They were really close allies. They had even, family visits between each other. Actually, things changed after the Egyptian revolution, and things started to be really strong. Really, something changed in the Qatari politics. Some will say that they had a kind of a deal with the Americans in this regard. I'm not here to analyze what happened really, but it was something strange. In my resignation letter, I was telling the executives of my channel that the first 15 days of the Syrian revolution, it was like nothing was happening in Syria. Al Jazeera wasn't covering, and in case there was any kind of coverage of what's going on there, we were referring to the uprising over there. It's kind of demonstrations asking for reforms. It's the same way the pro-Assad media was dealing with the revolution. But when the bilateral relations between the Qataris and the Syrians was kind of exploded for a reason we really don't know why, things changed, and we started dealing with the revolution in Syria as the priority of the channel, and that there is no other revolution but this revolution.
And is there any evidence that you know of that would show there's something had to do with the Saudi-Qatari relations that would have changed Qatar on this? Because the Saudis seem pretty militant on Syria right from the beginning.
Actually, the thing is, as I told you, something strange happened. What really happened? What are the under table deals that were really set? No one knows. Is it something that was really prepared before, and the Qataris were just waiting for a turning point to really be so blatant and clear about their own stance from Syria? Actually, I can't say, because I'm not a political analyst. Rather, I really cared for one thing: doing real journalism. I really don't really care about politics and who is with who, because my job as a journalist is saying what's going on and not doing things to and making things. So my problem was really journalism. I don't have a problem because actually, as you know, maybe Qatar have good relations with Israel. Qatar have good relations with America. Qatar have good relations with Iran, and that was just 1 year ago, 1 year before the revolution. It was Qatar had good relations with everyone except for Saudi Arabia. So in a day and a night, everything changed, and now Qatar is a country with enemies for the first time. They were kind of doing a strategy of the zero enemies, zero problems in the region, and they were trying to show themselves as the brokers of the region, brokers of peace deals, brokers of consensuses, whatever. They solved the problem in Lebanon. They solved the problem in Yemen. They tried to solve the problem in Yemen. They tried to solve the problems in Sudan. So these people were trying to play a role, and now they changed this role.
One of the turning points seemed to be Libya, because Qatar seemed to play such a leading role in the militarization of the Libyan conflict and being very, supportive and again, leading very much the expansion of the NATO mission and turning it into regime change in Libya. Was that a sort of a change in Qatari policy? Is that where this begins?
It seems the Libyan revolution was a main turning point in the whole thing. But you never know what was going before that, because it wouldn't be that one thing just changed everything. Assad's stance from Gaddafi was kind of supportive, but will this turn the Qataris against him directly? And okay, if that's true, then they will start covering the revolution in Syria from the beginning, and not waiting like 15 or 20 days to start covering this revolution. There are many stories said about Hamad bin Jassim going to Damascus and meeting al-Assad and telling him that the Qataris are ready to pay from $1 to $1 billion for reforms, and that Assad's regime have kind of surpluses against facing other regimes, whereas the regime is kind of supporting the resistance and against Israel, and this is kind of popular in the Arab world. So when Hamad when Hamad bin Jassim told him this things, then it, as I know, it might be confirmed, it might not be confirmed, but this is what is said. Then al-Assad was replied in a harsh way and asked him to leave the meeting room. And from that point, everything changed, and the Qataris decided to make al-Assad their own first enemy.
Well, in the next segment of our interview, we'll talk more about Libya, Bahrain, and Qatar, and the media in general. So please join us for the second part of our interview with Ali Hasham on the Real News Network. Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. We're continuing our discussion with Ali Hasham. He was a correspondent in the Middle East for Arabic Al Jazeera, and he joins us again from Beirut. Thanks for joining us, Ali.
You're welcome.
And I urge you to watch part 1 and part 2 of the interviews, because we're just going to pick up our conversation from where we left off. So, Ali, one of the concerns you expressed after you resigned was about Al Jazeera's coverage of Bahrain. Can you speak about that?
Actually, everyone around the Arab world, I'd just like to say this, everyone around the Arab world, from Morocco till Oman till Syria, everyone thought that Al Jazeera is kind of holding his own dreams, embracing his dreams, and as the voice of the voiceless, as they said before. But the problem is in Bahrain precisely there was a big problem, because Bahrain is a Gulf kingdom, and everyone over there, it's like 80% of the people, or 70% of the people are anti-government. So the government represents a minority in the country, where a big number of its people are really revolting against the regime. But given that this regime is a Sunni regime, and those who are doing the revolution are Shia, then it seems like they're not allowed to have their voice on air. So the Bahraini revolution was muted by, it's not only Al Jazeera, most of the Arab channels muted the Bahraini revolution, and it seems like people should be killed in Bahrain without having anyone asking for them. There should be no account for those who are killing those people in Bahrain. at the same time, the revolution was going on, and still it is still going on daily basis. The Saudi forces went into Bahrain, and no one was talking about the whole issue. It was kind of external factors were going inside, and things were deteriorating. But I don't know. There was a reason why all the Arab media channels, or most of them, were not covering this issue. It's kind of a sectarian maybe reason. I don't know. It's maybe because most of the Arab media capitals are being paid in the Gulf, and this is a Gulf state. So in case a Gulf state falls, then the other Gulf states are going to fall. Maybe this is the reason. I don't know why.
The coverage of Al Jazeera on Bahrain seemed kind of up and down. Well, on the whole, it certainly didn't cover Bahrain as much as it did, say, the Egyptian revolution, or certainly not Libya. There was, for example, a documentary they produced about Bahrain that did win an award and did critique the suppression of the protesters. There was the odd story.
People fighting for democratic rights broke the barriers of fear, only to find themselves alone and crushed. This is their story, and Al Jazeera is their witness.
So how does this work, that you get some coverage and then you get coverage pulled down and then you get lack of coverage? I mean, what is that dynamic?
Actually, the main coverage of Al-Bahrain was by Al Jazeera English and not Al Jazeera Arabic. Al Jazeera English, really, the guys over there made a great work. This documentary, it was really a very strong documentary documenting what's really going on. Actually, they had several reporters, who were kind of doing secret reporting from Bahrain, and they were really sacrificing their own security for the sake of their own career and their own of really good journalism. But the problem is the Arabic Al Jazeera wasn't really doing that much for Al-Bahrain. It was like there's something going on in the country, and we shouldn't say anything about it. And this is really, annoying, to know that, you're dealing with revolutions and people according to your own political agenda. So you're supporting people's, struggle in Syria, and I don't have a problem with supporting anyone. I mean, I would not the issue of support covering anyone. I don't have a problem with this issue. Whenever there are things going on, incidents going on, and my job as a journalist is covering this issues. I'm not supporting these issues. But the problem is we were supporting in some places and doing the cover over the other movements in other countries. So it's kind of, it was, as I said before, politicization of media once again. It's because of the bilateral relations. We do not support the covering what's happening in Bahrain. Why? Because of the bad bilateral relations between Syria and Qatar now, we should go to the end in covering the Syrian stories, and we should go, till even sometimes some people are really right now accusing Al Jazeera of kind of staging some reports. I really can't say anything about this issue precisely because everyone have the right to accuse, and at the same time Al Jazeera have the right to refute such accusations. But it's arriving at a point when people accuse us of staging things, that's really a big problem. I just give an example of other stations who are really till this hour working from Damascus, and no one is talking to them. At the same time, from Bahrain, Al Jazeera had a big access to go to Bahrain, but they didn't send any reporter at this time. Before they might have sent twice. Once someone from the general manager's office, he's a journalist, he was sent there, and he did some reports from Manama. It was kind of things are being solved in this regard.
I once did a search in WikiLeaks. I searched the whole database. I had access to it, and I did a search for Al Jazeera. And it's a very interesting arc of the history there, because during the Afghan war, one of the WikiLeaks talks about how the king of Bahrain was joking with the American ambassador, saying, one of these days when you're bombing Afghanistan, why don't you take out the Al Jazeera office at the same time? And then they kind of did that in Baghdad, where they did attack an Al Jazeera office, and some Al Jazeera reporters were killed. they being the U.S. But then there's a WikiLeaks, one of the cables talks about a meeting that takes place in Washington somewhere around 2008. Although actually before I go to this story, let me back up once more. There's also a story that just prior to the 2004 elections, when bin Laden sends his letter to the Americans, that there's a report by CBS that only CBS carried this report only on their website, and I saw this nowhere else, but I later did confirm this with people who I know, that Al Jazeera sent the bin Laden tape to the White House, to the Bush White House, to be reviewed, and they negotiated what could be released on the Friday, because the election was the following Tuesday. So they only released certain segments of the bin Laden letter to the Americans that the White House signed off on the Friday. On the Monday, they released in text the whole bin Laden letter, but by that point it had already missed the news cycle, and it was only in text, not the video. So only portions of the letter that, in my opinion, wound up helping Bush and not hurting him were released. Then jump ahead. Then apparently in WikiLeaks, not apparently, I saw this myself in WikiLeaks, I believed around 2008, and on this I have to go check my notes, but I believe it's with Hillary Clinton. There is a meeting between the leadership of Al Jazeera, Arabic, and the foreign minister of Qatar, and the WikiLeaks said it's a very good meeting, and the description of it is now it's clear now that Al Jazeera is going to be a voice for Qatari foreign policy.
Okay.
And Hillary Clinton starts saying good things about Al Jazeera. About something like about a year later, she starts talking about Al Jazeera as a very good news source.
Yeah.
I mean, how much of all this comings and goings affected you as a reporter? Did you see a kind of change in orientation?
No, actually, to be frank, no, we didn't touch such things, because these things are really very big. It's not our own things, because in general, the most thing that we can hear about is something like do this or don't do this, say this, but it's not like we will know what's really going on with the Americans, what's going on between the Qataris and Al Jazeera directly. It's not it's not what we have access to. We don't have access to such things. Actually, even in Al Jazeera till the end of my duties with them, they were always kind of trying to show us as reporters, put aside this issue that happened in Wadi Khalid that I spoke about. They were trying their best to show us as reporters that they have really good confidence in us as journalists, and they don't have any problem with any story. But the stories, then if you send the story, then the problem is in other places. It's not directly with your boss. Then you'll just hear about other problems in other places, inside the newsroom, the way they're dealing with the coverages. So the things that you were saying, I don't know anything about them, because actually I don't have access to such information. I wish I have such information so that I can say something about it.
That's okay. So over the course of these interviews, our discussions, we've been very critical about Al Jazeera, and I think to be fair, we better talk about the other side too, because there is another side.
Yeah, that's
which
right,
compared to most of the other media organizations in the world, the preponderance of Al Jazeera coverage is pretty good, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, actually, let me say something. Al Jazeera, from the year 1996 till 2011 was maybe I can say the Arab idol of media. Everyone was looking towards Al Jazeera, and we used to every journalist used to dream to be working with Al Jazeera. That's something obvious. Actually, even with other stories, for example, when in my time when I was working also with them, for example, when I went to Somalia and did some stories, it was kind of great. Everyone was happy. Al Jazeera was going to some places where no one dares to go, and they were trying their best to show some problems of those people, of the people who are really oppressed by whatever regimes, so etc. 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 Even their own coverage, for example, of the Gaza war, the war on Lebanon before. So, but the real problem was this coverage of the Arab Spring. It's not really my problem directly. Actually, it's the problem in the street. Everyone is talking about this issue. Everyone. Okay, some people are really happy with Al Jazeera covering in this way, but they are just turning to other channels to get more credible news because they know that Al Jazeera is on their own side. So they need to listen from a kind of a credible side or a neutral side, the real stories, because they think that Al Jazeera might really exaggerate a bit in such stories. Others who are on the other side and they are against Al Jazeera will also watch sometimes Al Jazeera, but will change to other neutral stations to know really what is really going on. So the problem is Al Jazeera in this 1 year, in the last 1 year, unfortunately sacrificed its own credibility for nothing. Everyone is kind of saying that Al Jazeera is committing suicide, and this is the biggest disaster I really feel happening in the Arab media. It's kind of a plight of the Arab media.
Thanks very much for joining us, Ali.
You're most welcome.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.